You're being dramatic. It's just a dinner. My husband and best friend sneered when they excluded me, mocking my overthinking. Furious, I booked a last-minute flight to Vegas. Mid-flight, I got a call. They'd accidentally set the kitchen on fire trying to cook my signature dish to impress their boss. Karma served flaming hot. You're being dramatic. It's just a dinner, Alexander sneered, his dismissive tone cutting through our kitchen like a knife. Beside him, Brandon nodded in agreement, both men exchanging that look I'd grown to despise. The one that said I was overreacting, being irrational, overthinking things. I stood frozen, my grandmother's obituary still clutched in my trembling hand, the other holding up the printed email invitation I discovered while searching for our tax documents. The fancy letterhead from Whitman and Associates, attorneys at law, glared back at me. A dinner to discuss the distribution of Eleanor Green's estate assets. My grandmother's estate, scheduled for tomorrow evening. An invitation addressed to my husband and, inexplicably, my best friend. Not me. Never me. Have you ever discovered someone's true intentions when family inheritances or treasured belongings are at stake? These moments can be painful revelations. If this story of betrayal, karma, and reclaiming what's rightfully yours speaks to you, hit that subscribe button. It costs nothing and helps us share more stories of people standing their ground. Now let's see how Caitlin handles this devastating discovery. Why is Brandon invited to discuss my grandmother's inheritance? My voice cracked, betraying the hurricane of emotions swirling inside. And why wasn't I included? Alexander sighed dramatically, running his fingers through his dark hair. The gesture that once made my heart flutter now only fueled my anger. Brandon has experience with property law. We thought his perspective would be helpful before bringing you into the conversation. You've been so emotional since your grandmother passed. Emotional. The word hung in the air between us. She raced me, Alexander. Of course I'm emotional. The kitchen still smelled faintly of apples and cinnamon. I'd spent yesterday afternoon trying to recreate Grandma Eleanor's famous apple pie. The recipe she'd perfected over 60 years. The one she promised would be mine alone when she passed. The legacy she'd entrusted to me, not my husband and certainly not Brandon. Caitlin, listen. Brandon stepped forward, his practiced lawyer voice smooth as butter. This is precisely why we wanted to handle the preliminary meeting. You're too close to this. The probate attorney just wants to discuss the technical aspects of the inheritance. We're protecting you. My gaze drifted to the kitchen counter where flour still dusted the surface. Grandma Eleanor teaching me to roll pie crust at 9 years old. Her wrinkled hands guiding mine. The secret is in the temperature, she'd whisper conspiratorially. Keep everything cold, especially your emotions when family's involved. Protecting me? I echoed, snapping back to the present. By going behind my back? Alexander checked his watch impatiently. We're not going behind your back. We're having dinner with a lawyer to discuss boring legal stuff so you don't have to. Why are you making this into World War III? The memory of Grandma's voice echoed in my mind. Pay attention to how people treat you when they think no one's watching, Katie Cat. That's when their true colors show. This isn't about legal technicalities, I said quietly, moving to the fridge where Grandma's last Christmas card hung, her elegant handwriting a painful reminder of what I'd lost. This is about my family's legacy. The lake house, her recipe books, the stories she wanted preserved. See, this is exactly what I mean, Alexander interrupted, sharing another knowing glance with Brandon. You're getting worked up over recipe books when there's actual valuable property involved. The summer memories flooded back unbidden. Grandma Eleanor and I sitting on the dock at the lake house, fireflies dancing around us as she told stories of her childhood. Family isn't about the things we leave behind, Katie, she'd said, but about the people who understand their value. Brandon cleared his throat. Alexander and I just want to make sure everything's handled properly. The lake house alone could be worth. Stop. My voice hardened. Stop pretending this is about helping me. My grandmother specifically said in her letters that the lake house wasn't to be sold. It's meant to stay in the family. Alexander's face flushed. That's impractical and you know it. We live 4 hours away. We'd never use it enough to justify keeping it. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You two have already decided what happens to my inheritance. I turned away, opening a kitchen drawer and pulling out Grandma's handwritten recipe for her apple pie. The edges were worn soft with use, small butter stains marking the corners. This was her legacy, not something to be divided and sold by men who never understood its worth. "Look, I've got a meeting in 20 minutes, Alexander said briskly. "Can we table this discussion? The dinner with Mr. Whitman is just preliminary anyway." Brandon nodded. "Absolutely. Caitlin, we're doing this for you. Once we understand the legal framework, you'll be fully involved in all decisions." That dismissive tone again. That patronizing glance between them. "No," I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. "I won't be tabled like some inconvenient agenda item. This is my grandmother, my inheritance, and you two are deliberately excluding me. For God's sake." Alexander slammed his hand on the counter, making me flinch. "You're being ridiculous. It's just a dinner." Something snapped inside me. The grief I'd been carefully managing since Grandma's passing 3 weeks ago combusted with this fresh betrayal. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling as I opened the travel app one rarely used. "What are you doing?" Alexander demanded, watching me tap frantically on the screen. "Booking a flight," I answered coldly. "To Vegas." "Vegas? Are you insane? We have responsibilities here." "Apparently my main responsibility is to sit quietly while you and Brandon decide what happens to my family legacy." The confirmation popped up on my screen. 1 round-trip ticket to Las Vegas, departing in 4 hours. An impulsive, reckless decision that felt surprisingly right. Brandon stepped forward, conciliatory now that things were escalating. "Caitlin, be reasonable. Alexander is just trying to help you avoid unnecessary stress." I laughed bitterly. "Unnecessary stress? My grandmother died 3 weeks ago, and now I discover my husband and best friend are secretly meeting with her probate attorney without me. But sure, tell me more about avoiding stress." I moved toward our bedroom, Alexander following closely behind. "You can't just run away to Vegas because you're upset about a dinner," he argued as I pulled out my carry-on suitcase. "Watch me." I began grabbing clothes. Practical, everyday items, not the fancy outfits Vegas stereotypically demanded. I wasn't going to gamble or party. I was going to breathe, to think, to grieve without the suffocating presence of these 2 men who clearly thought so little of my feelings. "This is exactly why we didn't include you in the dinner," Alexander hissed. "You're being completely irrational." I paused, Grandma Eleanor's voice once more filling my mind. "When someone shows you who they are, Katie Cat, believe them the first time." Looking my husband directly in the eyes, I replied, "No, Alexander. This is exactly why you should have included me. Because now you've shown me exactly who you both are." I zipped my suitcase closed with finality, Grandma Eleanor's weathered recipe book tucked safely inside, beside the grief and betrayal that would accompany me to Vegas. The rideshare driver didn't ask questions when he saw my red-rimmed eyes, just quietly loaded my suitcase and drove me to the airport. I was grateful for the silence, using the 40-minute ride to compose myself. Alexander had called 3 times already. I sent each to voicemail, watching the familiar landscape of our suburban neighborhood fade into highway scenery. Denver International Airport buzzed with its usual chaotic energy. Business travelers rushing past, families corralling excited children. I moved through security in a daze, half expecting Alexander to appear and dramatically stop me. He didn't. Once past the TSA checkpoint, I checked my phone again. 5 missed calls now, 2 from Brandon. A text message appeared. "This is exactly what I meant about being emotional. Call me when you're thinking rationally." I turned my phone to airplane mode and headed for the gate. "That's quite a sigh you've got there," came a voice as I settled into my window seat. "Either you're afraid of flying or running from something significant." I turned to find a woman in her 60s with a silver pixie cut and kind eyes studying me. Her navy blazer and simple pearl earrings reminded me so much of Grandma Eleanor that my throat tightened. "A bit of both, maybe," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty with a stranger. "I'm Martha," she offered, extending a hand. "And I've got a pretty good radar for people having terrible days." "Caitlin," I replied, shaking her hand. "And terrible doesn't begin to cover it." Perhaps it was the anonymity of airplane confidences or Martha's grandmotherly demeanor. But somewhere over the Rockies, I found myself telling her everything. Grandma Eleanor's passing, the secret dinner meeting, Alexander and Brandon's dismissive attitudes. Family inheritance. Martha nodded sagely as the flight attendant handed us plastic cups of soda. Nothing reveals people's true characters faster. That's almost exactly what my grandmother used to say. I smiled faintly. Smart woman. I've been a family court judge for 30 years, Martha explained. Seen marriages crumble over less than what you're describing. Does your husband often exclude you from financial decisions? The question hit like a thunderbolt. I thought back to our mortgage refinancing last year, how Alexander had handled everything with Brandon's advice, presenting me with papers to sign without explanation. The investment account he'd opened for us after his promotion. The way financial discussions always seemed to end with him patting my hand and saying, "Don't worry about it, I've got this covered." More than I realized until just now, I admitted quietly. Martha nodded. Your impromptu Vegas trip might be the best decision you've made in a while. Sometimes we need distance to see patterns clearly. As the plane began its descent into Las Vegas, Martha handed me her business card. If you need legal advice when you get home, call my office. First consultations free. The blast of desert heat hit me as I exited McCarran International Airport. Vegas sparkled in the distance, neon lights just beginning to pulse against the darkening sky. I switched my phone off airplane mode and was immediately bombarded with notifications. 7 missed calls, 12 text messages. I scrolled quickly. This is childish, Caitlin. Call me. Alexander is worried sick. Please call one of us. Brandon. I know you're upset, but this is extreme. Mr. Whitman agreed to reschedule. Come home and we'll all meet together. The last one made me laugh bitterly. Now they wanted to include me. I checked into the Oasis Inn, a modest hotel several blocks off the strip. The room was clean but basic. No fancy minibar or plush bathrobes, just a comfortable bed, workable air conditioning and blessed quiet. I kicked off my shoes and lay back on the bed, feeling my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. My phone buzzed again with another text. I'm sorry if we made you feel excluded. That wasn't our intention. But running away doesn't solve anything. Still no acknowledgement that they were wrong, just carefully worded non-apologies meant to make me feel irrational. I turned off notifications and went to find the hotel bar. The Oasis Lounge was blessedly subdued compared to the casino floors I'd passed on my cab ride. I ordered a glass of white wine and sat at the far end of the bar, watching a basketball game on the overhead TV without really seeing it. Caitlin Green. I looked up, startled to hear my maiden name. A tall woman with a familiar smile approached, wearing a casino uniform with floor manager embroidered on the pocket. It's Dee Simmons, well, Dee Carson now. We had AP English together senior year. Recognition dawned. Dee. Oh my gosh. We embraced awkwardly, years of distance immediately bridged by shared teenage memories. What brings you to Vegas? Business or escaping reality? She joked, sliding onto the bar stool beside me. Definitely the latter, I admitted, taking a long sip of wine. The best reason to come here, Dee nodded. I've worked casino floors for 12 years. Seen every kind of escape artist there is. Somehow the wine and Dee's easy conversation loosened something in me. I found myself sharing the whole situation. Grandma's death, the inheritance drama, Alexander and Brandon's betrayal. Men and their fragile egos, Dee rolled her eyes. My ex-husband pulled similar stunts. Always knew what was best for me without bothering to ask what I actually wanted. Ex-husband, I repeated, the word feeling strange on my tongue. Best decision I ever made, she said firmly. Took me 3 years to realize I was shrinking myself to make him comfortable. She leaned closer. Whatever you decide about your marriage, don't let them bully you about the inheritance. My grandmother left me her jewelry collection, and my ex tried claiming half of it in the divorce. Stand your ground. After exchanging numbers with promises to catch up properly before I left Vegas, I returned to my room feeling strangely lighter. I called my sister Emma, something I should have done weeks ago. Finally, Emma exclaimed when she answered. I've been trying to reach you for days. Alexander said you were too upset to talk about Grandma's will. What? I sat bolt upright. He told you that? The conversation that followed revealed disturbing new information. Grandma Eleanor had indeed been very specific about certain items in her will. The lake house was explicitly left to Emma and me jointly, not to our spouses. Her collection of first edition books was meant for me alone, given my literature degree. And most importantly, she'd left a separate letter with the attorney explaining her wishes for the family heirlooms. Did you know Brandon's been helping Alexander research lakefront property values? Emma asked. He mentioned it when he called asking about Grandma's property taxes. My suspicions crystallized into certainty. Reaching for my suitcase, I unzipped the side pocket where I'd carefully tucked Grandma Eleanor's recipe book for safekeeping. It wasn't there. I emptied the entire suitcase onto the bed, hands trembling as I searched through every compartment. The recipe book, handwritten pages of family history spanning 3 generations, was gone. In its place was a folded note in Alexander's handwriting. "You'll thank me later for keeping this safe. It's too valuable to risk losing." He'd taken it while I was packing. The one thing I'd wanted to keep close to me during this painful time. My phone rang, Alexander again. This time I answered. "Where is Grandma's recipe book?" I demanded, skipping any greeting. A pause, then, "It's safe at home where it belongs. I was worried you'd lose it on your impulsive trip." "You had no right." "I had every right," he interrupted. "As your husband, I'm protecting our assets." "Our assets? That book was never yours." "Caitlin," his voice shifted to that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. "This is exactly why Brandon and I need to handle the inheritance matters. You're too emotional to think clearly about what's valuable and what isn't." In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. This wasn't just about a dinner or even about the inheritance. This was about respect, autonomy, and being treated as an equal partner. "You know what, Alexander? Keep the book for now," I said with newfound calm. "I'll deal with you when I get back." I hung up, immediately calling Mr. Whitman's office and leaving a message requesting a private appointment upon my return. Then I texted Emma. "We need to talk more about Grandma's will. Call me tomorrow." For the first time since landing in Vegas, I felt the fog of grief and confusion lifting, replaced by clarity and purpose. Alexander and Brandon had made a critical miscalculation. They thought my escape to Vegas was an emotional breakdown. They were about to discover it was actually my awakening. I couldn't see what was happening back home, but I later pieced it together from the frantic phone calls, security camera footage, and Alexander's reluctant confessions. While I was finding clarity in Vegas, my husband and so-called best friend were setting a plan in motion that would backfire in ways none of us could have imagined. After our tense phone conversation about Grandma Eleanor's recipe book, Alexander hung up feeling unsettled. I'd struck a nerve, though he'd never admit it to Brandon, who sat at our kitchen island scrolling through real estate listings on his tablet. "So she's not coming back tonight," Brandon confirmed, barely looking up from whatever property he was eyeing. "No," Alexander replied with that frustrated sigh I knew so well. "And now she's fixated on that damn recipe book." I later learned that Brandon had closed his tablet and leaned forward with that conspiratorial look he used when closing real estate deals. "Look, we need to focus." Whitman agreed to reschedule for tomorrow afternoon. "Eleanor's estate is worth serious money, especially that lakefront property. We need a strategy." My blood still boils thinking about how they discussed my grandmother's legacy like it was just another asset to liquidate. The lakefront property, the place where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, where Grandma Eleanor had taught me to swim, where we'd watched meteor showers from the dock. To them it was just dollar signs. Whitman seemed pretty rigid about following Eleanor's exact wishes when we spoke on the phone, Alexander had apparently said, showing the first glimmer of hesitation. Brandon, ever the manipulator, saw an opportunity. "That's why tomorrow matters so much. These old-school probate attorneys care about family traditions, continuity. He needs to see us as proper stewards of Eleanor's legacy." And that's when they hatched their plan. A plan so ridiculous it would have been funny if it hadn't ended so disastrously. They would bake Grandma Eleanor's famous apple pie to create the right atmosphere for their meeting with Mr. Whitman. They would use the stolen recipe book, my inheritance, my connection to my grandmother, to convince the attorney they should have control over the estate. I can picture Alexander's bewildered expression as he stared at my grandmother's handwritten recipe. He'd never made so much as toast in our 5 years of marriage. Cooking was my domain, as he liked to remind dinner guests when they complimented a meal. "I've never made a pie in my life," he'd protested. Brandon, who wouldn't know a whisk from a spatula, had the audacity to say, How hard can it be? We have the recipe right here. Besides, Whitman mentioned he was bringing his assistant along. More witnesses to our family devotion means better chances of favorable distribution. The security camera in our kitchen caught snippets of what followed. Alexander standing confused before a mountain of flour and butter, squinting at Grandma's elegant handwriting. What the hell does scant quarter cup mean? Brandon, naturally, appointed himself supervisor rather than helper, checking his watch repeatedly. We've got 3 hours before Whitman arrives. The pie needs to be cooling when he gets here. The smell is half the effect. What the camera didn't catch, but Alexander later admitted during one of his remorseful confessions, was Brandon's real agenda. While Alexander struggled with pie dough, Brandon had casually mentioned his contact at Lakeside Realty, who apparently had 3 pre-qualified buyers ready to tour, if they could get the lake house on the market quickly. Your commission? Alexander had apparently asked, catching on for once. You never mentioned you'd be the listing agent. Brandon had shrugged it off with practiced nonchalance. Makes sense, doesn't it? I know the property, I've already got buyers lined up, and I can offer you a better split than you'd get with another agent. And then came the carrot, the bait he dangled in front of my husband. With the proceeds, you could finally upgrade to that golf club membership you've been eyeing, maybe even buy that boat. My husband, to his minimal credit, had apparently shown a flicker of conscience. Did Caitlin ever say why her grandmother wanted to keep the lake house in the family? Brandon had dismissed this rare moment of consideration. Does it matter? It's an outdated sentiment. The property taxes alone will be a burden. I wish I could have been there to answer. Yes, it matters. It matters because that lake house was where 3 generations of our family had gathered every summer. It matters because Grandma Eleanor specifically wanted Emma and me to have a place to bring our future children, to keep family traditions alive. It matters because some things can't be measured in dollars and cents. But I wasn't there. Instead, Alexander stood in our kitchen, making a complete mess of Grandma's recipe while Brandon filled his head with visions of golf memberships and boats. The security footage showed Alexander struggling with the lattice top crust, his fingers clumsy and impatient. Brandon checking his watch, suggesting they skip the lattice altogether. We're running out of time and I still need to brief you on how to approach the inheritance discussion. Their strategy, as Alexander later confessed, was truly appalling. We emphasized the burden of maintaining it, the sentimentality of preserving Eleanor's memory through photographs rather than an expensive property, and most importantly, we make it clear that Caitlin is too emotionally attached to make rational decisions right now. Too emotionally attached to my own grandmother's legacy. The grandmother who raised me after my parents died. The woman whose wisdom and love shaped everything good in me. Yes, I was attached with good reason. What happened next was captured perfectly on our security camera. The 2 of them had moved to the dining room to review documents Brandon had prepared. Tax assessments, maintenance estimates that I later discovered were deliberately inflated, and cherry-picked property comparisons designed to show maximum profit potential. The timer had beeped in the kitchen, but they were too engrossed in their scheming to notice. The camera showed smoke beginning to curl from the oven vents while they remained oblivious in the next room. The smoke grew thicker, the timer continuing its unheeded alert. Finally, Alexander had looked up, sniffing the air. Is something burning? The camera captured their panicked rush to the kitchen. Alexander yanking open the oven door without turning it off first, releasing a cloud of black smoke. The pie wasn't just burned, it had caught fire, flames licking at the edges where butter had dripped onto the oven floor. Get water. Alexander had shouted, coughing through the smoke. No. Not on an oven fire. Brandon yelled back, but it was too late. Alexander had already thrown a glass of water onto the flaming pie, creating the disaster I would soon learn about thousands of miles away in my quiet Vegas hotel room. I was lounging on the hotel bed, flipping through channels and contemplating a room service dinner when my phone lit up with Alexander's name. After our earlier conversation, I almost didn't answer. Something told me to pick up. Intuition, perhaps, or simply the residual habit of being a responsible spouse. What now, Alexander? I answered flatly. The sound of sirens nearly drowned out his voice. Caitlin, there's been an accident. His words tumbled out between ragged breaths. The kitchen, it's bad. There's fire trucks and... Fire trucks. I sat bolt upright, my heart suddenly pounding. What happened? The pie, your grandmother's recipe, we were trying to make it for Whitman and... He broke off as someone shouted in the background. Is everyone okay? I asked, my anger temporarily displaced by genuine concern. Yes, we're fine, but the kitchen... His voice cracked. It's destroyed, Caitlin. And... He hesitated, and I knew instinctively something worse was coming. Your grandmother's hope chest. It was in the dining room, and the fire spread before the firefighters arrived. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Grandma Eleanor's antique hope chest, the one she'd brought from England as a young bride. The chest containing generations of family letters, sepia-toned photographs of ancestors I'd never met but whose stories I knew by heart, the handwritten journals chronicling family history back to the 1800s. How bad? I whispered, barely able to force the words out. The firefighters saved most of it, but it's damaged. Smoke and water damage, some charring on the outside. I closed my eyes, trying to process this fresh loss. And the contents? His silence told me everything. How did this happen? I finally asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded despite the storm raging inside me. Alexander explained haltingly about the pie, the oven fire, how throwing water on it had only made things worse. How they'd been so focused on preparing for Whitman's visit that they'd forgotten about the timer. Wait, I interrupted, a new realization dawning. Whitman was there. During the fire. He arrived just as we were trying to put it out, Alexander admitted. He called 911 while Brandon tried using the fire extinguisher, but it was too small and the flames had already reached the curtains. I pictured the scene, the dignified probate attorney walking into chaos, witnessing my husband and best friend's incompetence firsthand. Under different circumstances, I might have found it darkly humorous. Mr. Whitman stayed throughout, Alexander continued. He was taking notes. Taking notes. I repeated. About the damage. About the heirlooms affected. He kept mentioning responsible asset management, and asking if we had updated our homeowner's insurance to cover Eleanor's belongings. A strange calm settled over me. Let me talk to him. What? No. Caitlin, there are firefighters still here and... Put him on the phone, Alexander. To my surprise, moments later, Mr. Whitman's crisp, professional voice came through. Mrs. Anderson? This is Jerome Whitman. I understand you're currently in Las Vegas. Yes, Mr. Whitman. I apologize for not being present for our meeting. Given the circumstances, perhaps your absence was fortunate. His tone was impossible to read. Mrs. Anderson, are you aware that your husband and Mr. Reynolds were planning to discuss the immediate sale of your grandmother's lake property today? My breath caught. They told you that? Not directly. However, I discovered quite detailed sales projections among the paperwork that survived the incident. Documentation prepared by Mr. Reynolds' real estate office. I closed my eyes, the final confirmation of what I'd already suspected landing like a physical blow. Mr. Whitman, my grandmother specifically wanted that property to remain in the family. My sister and I spent every summer there growing up. I'm well aware of Eleanor's wishes, he replied. I've been her attorney for 37 years. Which is why I found today's events particularly illuminating. In the background, I could hear Alexander asking what we were discussing. Mr. Whitman ignored him. Mrs. Anderson, I believe you should return as soon as possible. The reading of the will was scheduled for next week, but given today's events, I think we should proceed earlier. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow, I promised. Excellent. And Mrs. Anderson? Your grandmother was an excellent judge of character. I'm beginning to understand why she structured her will as she did. After hanging up, I sat motionless, letting the implications wash over me. In trying to manipulate the inheritance situation in my absence, Alexander and Brandon had inadvertently revealed their true intentions more clearly than if I'd been present. Their scheme had literally gone up in flames. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Just heard about the fire. Are you okay? Call me. I dialed her immediately. What happened? She demanded. Alexander called in a panic, asking if I knew when you'd be back. I explained everything. The secret dinner, my impulsive trip, and now the disastrous fire. They destroyed Grandma's hope chest, Emma. All those family photographs, her journals. Not all of them, Emma said quietly. What do you mean? Grandma gave me a key to her safe deposit box last year. She'd been copying her journals and storing the originals. Said she didn't trust leaving history in one basket. The hope chest held the copies, Katie. Relief washed over me so intensely I felt dizzy. She never told me. She said you had enough to manage with your marriage. Emma hesitated. She worried about Alexander. Said he reminded her of our grandfather. Always looking for shortcuts to wealth without understanding true value. This new revelation about Grandma's perception of my husband hit hard. She'd seen what I'd been blind to for years. There's more, Emma continued. Brandon called me last week asking about potential buyers for the lake house. Said you and Alexander were considering selling since it would be too painful for you to visit after Grandma's passing. White-hot anger flashed through me. He was laying groundwork. Setting things up so selling seemed like my idea. That's not all. I checked with Grandma's neighbors at the lake. Brandon's shown the property twice already. Told them he was doing a market evaluation at your request. I thought of Martha, the judge I'd met on the plane, warning me about inheritance bringing out people's true characters. How right she'd been. My phone buzzed with another call, Alexander again. I ignored it. What are you going to do? Emma asked. I looked around the modest hotel room that had become an unexpected sanctuary, a place where clarity had finally found me. I'm coming home tomorrow. Not for Alexander but for Grandma. For her legacy. And then I stop being the woman who gets excluded from decisions about her own life. My voice strengthened with each word. The fire showed their true intentions, Emma. They thought my absence gave them freedom to act. Instead, it exposed exactly who they are. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and booked the earliest flight back to Denver. Then I emailed Martha, the judge from the plane, accepting her offer of a legal consultation. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to exclude me from decisions about my inheritance, Alexander and Brandon had done exactly what Grandmother had predicted. They'd shown their true colors when they thought no one was watching. Their attempt to impress a probate attorney with superficial family traditions had instead revealed their complete lack of respect for those very traditions. Sometimes I realized you have to leave to see clearly what you've been living with all along. The return flight to Denver felt entirely different from my escape to Vegas just days earlier. That journey had been fueled by raw emotion. Hurt, anger, betrayal. This return was marked by a calm determination that settled over me like a protective cloak. The middle-aged businessman beside me asked if I was heading home or leaving, and I found myself considering the question more deeply than he intended. Both, I think, I finally answered, offering no further explanation. Cloud shadows danced across the Rocky Mountains below us, creating a patchwork of light and darkness that mirrored my thoughts. I thought about the photographs in Grandma Eleanor's hope chest. Some salvageable, others lost forever. Relationships could be like that too, I realized. Some could be preserved despite damage, while others were simply beyond repair. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, bringing me back to the reality awaiting me. I hadn't told Alexander exactly when I was arriving. This homecoming would be on my terms. Emma met me at the airport, her hug fierce and protective. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, studying my face. "I've never been more ready for anything," I replied, surprised by how true it felt. The drive to my neighborhood was filled with updates. The fire department had declared the kitchen a total loss but had managed to contain the damage to that room and part of the dining room. The insurance adjusters had already been by. Alexander had been calling Emma repeatedly, asking when I'd return. "And Brandon?" I asked. "Suspiciously quiet," Emma replied. "Though his real estate listings now include a coming-soon lakefront property with our grandmother's address." My hands curled into fists before consciously relaxing them. "He's getting ahead of himself." As Emma turned onto my street, the acrid smell of smoke greeted us before we even reached the house. Yellow caution tape cordoned off the kitchen door, and a restoration company van sat in the driveway. Alexander rushed out when he heard the car, his expression a careful mix of relief and contrition. "Caitlin, thank God you're back." I nodded curtly, moving past him into the house without accepting his attempted embrace. The smell was worse inside, smoke and chemical flame retardants creating a nauseating combination. Plastic sheeting separated the kitchen from the rest of the house, but I could see the destruction through the translucent barrier: blackened cabinets, melted appliances and water damage streaking what remained of the walls. The recipe book, I said, my voice steady. Where is it? Alexander hesitated before leading me to the dining room. On the table lay Grandma Eleanor's recipe book, its leather cover charred at the edges, water stains blooming across many pages. Gingerly, I opened it, fanning through the sodden pages until I found what I was looking for. The apple pie recipe that had started this whole mess. The page was singed around the edges, but remarkably at the bottom, Grandma Eleanor's personal note remained legible. For Caitlin, who understands that recipes, like legacies, aren't about ingredients but about the love we stir into them. My fingers traced her handwriting as something shifted inside me. A letting go of anger replaced by resolve. Mr. Whitman is meeting us at his office at 3, Emma said softly from behind me. Alexander's head snapped up. Us? I thought. Emma and I clarified. He specifically requested we come alone. But I'm your husband, Alexander protested. This affects me too. Does it? I asked, looking at him directly. Or does it affect your plans with Brandon? He had the decency to look away, guilt flashing across his face. Caitlin, about that. Save it, I interrupted. We'll talk after I've met with Mr. Whitman. The elegant offices of Whitman and Associates provided a stark contrast to the chaos of my smoke-damaged home. Mr. Whitman, a dignified man in his 70s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, greeted Emma and me with formal courtesy. Mrs. Anderson, Miss Green, he nodded, gesturing to the chairs before his immaculate desk. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for rearranging your schedule, I replied, settling into the leather chair. Some circumstances warrant immediate attention, he said, opening a file with my grandmother's name embossed on the cover. I've been Eleanor's attorney and friend for nearly 4 decades. She was a remarkable woman with exceptional foresight. She could see through people, Emma agreed. Indeed. Mr. Whitman steepled his fingers. Which brings us to the matter at hand. Yesterday's incident raised significant concerns about the administration of Eleanor's estate, particularly regarding the Lake House property. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. Eleanor was quite specific in her instructions. The Lake House is to be jointly owned by you and your sister, with explicit instructions that it not be sold for at least 10 years after her passing. He looked up. She wanted to ensure her great-grandchildren would know the place that meant so much to her family. No great-grandchildren yet, Emma said softly. Eleanor was patient. Mr. Whitman's lips curved slightly. Now, given yesterday's events and the old documentation I observed regarding premature sales plans, I must ask, do you have concerns about your husband's intentions regarding this inheritance? The question hung in the air, demanding honesty. Yes, I finally said. I believe Alexander and my former friend Brandon planned to pressure me into selling against my grandmother's wishes. Mr. Whitman nodded, unsurprised. Eleanor anticipated such a possibility. He turned a page in the file, revealing a document I hadn't seen before. This addendum to her will, signed 6 months ago, stipulates that should there be any attempt to circumvent her wishes regarding the lake property, full ownership would revert solely to you, Mrs. Anderson, with your sister as secondary beneficiary. My breath caught. She knew. Eleanor noticed dynamics in your marriage that concerned her, Mr. Whitman said carefully. The last time she visited, she mentioned adding this clause as a safety net, as she called it. Tears pricked behind my eyes. Even from beyond, Grandma Eleanor was protecting me. There's more, Mr. Whitman continued, turning another page. The collection of family heirlooms, including the recipe books, hope chest, and jewelry, were never intended for joint marital ownership. They were bequeathed to you personally, outside of any marital property considerations. Emma reached over, squeezing my hand. She wanted you to have security and autonomy, Mrs. Anderson, Mr. Whitman said gently. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with it. The drive home was quiet, my mind sorting through implications and decisions. When we arrived, Alexander was waiting anxiously in the living room, pacing. What happened? He demanded. What did Whitman say? I set my purse down calmly. He clarified Grandma's wishes. The lake house stays in the family, no selling. The heirlooms are mine alone, legally separate from marital property. Alexander's face flushed. That's ridiculous. As your husband. As my husband, I cut him off. You conspired with Brandon to sell property that was precious to me, lied about meetings, stole my grandmother's recipe book, and then managed to burn down our kitchen trying to manipulate a probate attorney. His mouth opened and closed, no defense forthcoming. I'll be staying at the lake house for a while, I continued. Emma's driving me up tomorrow. I need space to think about what happens next for us. Caitlin, please, Alexander's voice cracked. It was Brandon's idea. He pushed for selling. And you went along with it, I finished for him. That's the problem, Alexander. You were willing to discard something precious to me for a boat and a golf membership. I moved to the stairs, then paused, turning back. Grandma Eleanor used to say that when life goes up in flames, you can either stare at the ashes or use them to fertilize something new. I picked up the charred recipe book from the table. I'm choosing the latter. As Emma and I drove toward the lake house the next morning, the rising sun painted the horizon with possibilities. The recipe book sat in my lap, damaged but not destroyed. Like me, some inheritances come in the form of property and heirlooms. Others come as lessons and clarity. Grandma Eleanor had given me both.